Have you ever felt that reality was trying to speak to you? You think of someone, and before you can even reach for your phone, a message from them lights up your screen. You look at the clock, and there it is again, 11:11, as if time itself were winking at you. You walk into a bookstore without a plan, and a book falls right in front of you, opening to a passage that answers the question that's been haunting your mind all week. We call these things coincidences. Carl Jung called them synchronicities. He believed they were moments when the invisible architecture of the universe briefly reveals itself. When the boundary between the inner world and the outer world dissolves for just long enough to remind us that maybe they were never separate at all. Jung was not a man easily fooled by fantasy. He trained as a medical doctor, lived in the realm of psychiatry, and understood the precision of science. Yet he also knew that human life could not be measured only in neurons and data. He saw meaning where others saw chance, and connection where others saw chaos. Synchronicity, for him, was not proof of magic, but evidence of relationship, a mysterious conversation between the psyche and the cosmos. To him, the universe was not a cold machine ticking forward indifferently. It was alive, responsive, symbolic, and deeply participatory. In the modern world, we're taught to filter out anything that can't be quantified. We praise logic, we chase productivity, and we laugh off anything that sounds mystical. But that sterilized worldview leaves many of us feeling isolated, restless, and hollow. We scroll endlessly, hoping the next post, the next product, the next piece of information will fill the silence we feel inside. But what if the silence isn't emptiness? What if it's a language we've forgotten how to hear? Synchronicity, Jung would say, is that language whispering again. It's the universe answering back when you finally stop talking. There's a difference between superstition and synchronicity. Superstition is fear, trying to control fate by symbols we don't understand. Synchronicity is awareness, recognizing that meaning itself is a living bridge between mind and matter. Jung once wrote that synchronicity is a causal connecting principle. Events connected not by cause and effect, but by shared significance. Think about that. A world where meaning, not mechanics, decides what comes together. It's an unsettling idea because it challenges the illusion that we are in control. Yet it's also comforting because it hints that we are seen, that existence itself participates in our becoming. The first time Jung truly grasped this principle, he was sitting with a patient who prided herself on rationality. She rejected every idea that didn't fit the scientific framework. One day she told Jung about a dream of a golden scarab, an ancient Egyptian symbol of rebirth. As she spoke, a soft tapping came from the window. Jung turned and found a beetle with a metallic green sheen, rare for that region. He caught it and handed it to her. "Here is your scarab," he said. That tiny interruption broke through years of resistance. Something inside her yielded, and healing began. It wasn't the bug that mattered. It was the timing, the echo between her inner image and the outer event. The psyche had spoken, and the world had answered. Moments like that seem small until you live one. Maybe you've walked away from a toxic job, terrified, and on the same day an old mentor calls with a new opportunity. Maybe you've spent nights grieving someone, only to dream of them smiling just before the dawn that brings closure. Maybe you've been thinking about courage, and a stranger's words on the street slice straight into your heart. These are not coincidences in the shallow sense. They're mirrors held up by life itself, reflecting the movement of the soul. We like to believe we make meaning. Jung would say we discover it. Synchronicity is not proof of destiny, but evidence of alignment. When your inner state changes, when you confront a fear, release an attachment, or awaken a forgotten truth, the world often reshapes itself around that shift. The outer responds to the inner because both arise from the same unseen source. The ego experiences that as miracle, but the self knows it as recognition. You might wonder if this means we should interpret everything, a traffic light turning green, a bird crossing our path, as a sign. Not at all. The point is not to inflate the ego into a prophet. It's to awaken sensitivity to meaning. Synchronicity invites curiosity, not control. It asks, what inside me does this resonate with? What feeling, what question, what need does this moment illuminate? Sometimes the message is simple. Slow down, pay attention, stay present. Sometimes it's profound. You're on the threshold of transformation. Jung observed that synchronicities often appear during times of emotional intensity, when we're in love, grieving, afraid, or deeply uncertain. The psyche uses outer events the way a dream uses symbols, translating invisible truth into visible language. In that sense, life itself becomes a dream we participate in. The more conscious we become, the more dialogue we perceive between our mind and the world around us, and that awareness changes everything. Suddenly, existence feels intimate again. Still, skepticism is healthy. The rational mind demands proof, and Jung respected that. He never claimed to know how synchronicity worked, only that it did. He compared it to quantum physics before physics caught up. Particles separated by distance still influencing one another, not through force but through entanglement. Perhaps consciousness is like that too, entangled across space and time in ways we don't yet understand. Science measures patterns. Jung asked us to feel them. Imagine the difference this makes in how you live. If reality is a conversation, not a monologue, then every coincidence carries potential meaning. The point is not to decode the universe like a puzzle, but to cultivate trust in its rhythm. You begin to act with presence instead of panic. You start to see guidance where before you saw only noise. And even when life hurts, even when things fall apart, you sense that something intelligent is unfolding beneath the surface. Maybe that's the secret that synchronicity wants to teach us, that the psyche and the cosmos are not enemies. They're partners in a slow dance toward awareness. And in that dance, every step matters, every meeting, every loss, every repetition of a number or a symbol is another ripple in the same sea. Coincidence? Maybe. But maybe coincidence is just our name for the parts of order we haven't yet recognized. So when the next strange alignment happens, pause. Don't rush to explain it away or to crown it as divine revelation. Just notice. Feel what stirs in you. Smile at the possibility that for one brief moment, the universe turned its face toward yours and said, I'm listening. Have you ever wondered why synchronicities seem to appear in clusters? They arrive in waves, one uncanny alignment after another, and then vanish just as mysteriously. You start seeing repeating numbers, meeting the same name in different places, hearing the same phrase from strangers. It's as if reality itself is trying to underline something. Jung noticed this too. He said that synchronicity often intensifies when a person is standing on the edge of psychological transformation. When the ego can no longer explain everything, when reason begins to crack, the unconscious starts to communicate through pattern and timing. What you call coincidence might actually be a coded message from your deeper self. Jung believed that the psyche is not confined to the skull. It's woven into the fabric of the world. The events that echo your thoughts are not random, they're reflections. He called this the psychoid level of reality, where mind and matter share a single root. To glimpse it is to realize that your consciousness is not an island, it's part of a sea. Every thought you have sends ripples outward. Every external event sends ripples back. When those waves meet in resonance, we experience synchronicity. It's not superstition, it's resonance made visible. Think about how a dream works. In dreams, logic bends so the heart can speak. You might see a house crumbling, and that image tells you more about your emotional state than 1,000 rational words could. Synchronicity is the waking dream. It uses the world as its canvas. A song on the radio answers a silent prayer. A stranger's remark touches an old wound. A random delay makes you meet the right person. When you start paying attention, you see that meaning doesn't wait to be discovered. It's already everywhere, woven into everything. The problem is that modern life teaches us to live deaf to that music. We worship control. We schedule, analyze, and measure until there's no room left for mystery. Yet the human soul starves without mystery. Jung saw synchronicity as a rebellion of the unconscious against the arrogance of reason. When logic tries to rule everything, life finds another way to reach you. The more you ignore intuition, the louder the universe has to knock. Sometimes softly, through numbers and dreams. Sometimes violently, through loss or crisis. Either way, the message is the same. Wake up. There is more here than you think. Synchronicity isn't just a curiosity of the psyche. It's a compass. It points toward the parts of your life that are ready to change. When you begin to notice certain symbols repeating, an animal, a phrase, a place, stop asking what it means out there. Ask what it mirrors in here. Maybe the crow that keeps appearing represents a truth you've been avoiding. Maybe the number sequence speaks to a decision you haven't made. The universe doesn't give instructions. It gives invitations. Meaning arises when you respond. That's why Jung insisted on participation. To work with synchronicity, you can't remain a passive observer. You must meet it halfway. Write down the events. Track the emotions that accompany them. Don't chase signs. Let them gather naturally. Over time, you'll see patterns that reflect your psychological process. They might confirm an intuition, reveal a shadow, or announce a transition. The more conscious you become, the more coherent these signs feel. It's as though reality synchronizes itself with your inner growth. Skeptics argue that humans are pattern-seeking creatures, that we invent meaning because randomness frightens us. They're not wrong. The brain does seek order. But Jung would reply, the capacity to find meaning is not a flaw. It's the very function that connects us to soul. The question is not whether coincidences are objectively real, but whether they transform you. If a coincidence opens your perception, softens your cynicism, or reminds you that life is alive, then it has already served its purpose. The sacred doesn't need proof, it needs participation. In his later years, Jung noticed that people who paid attention to synchronicities developed what he called a sense of destiny. Not fatalism, destiny. The feeling that one's life has an invisible coherence, a thread running through even the chaos. This sense doesn't make suffering disappear, but it gives suffering shape. It turns confusion into pilgrimage. Every hardship becomes an initiation, every chance encounter a clue. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, what is this teaching me? That shift is the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming whole. You don't have to believe in cosmic manipulation to live this way. You only need humility, the willingness to admit that your conscious mind is not the whole story. The ego sees fragments, the self sees the tapestry. Synchronicity is how the tapestry reveals itself, one thread at a time. The point is not to control it, not to demand meaning from every flicker, but to remain available. It's like catching fireflies. You can't chase them. You can only stand still until they come to you. If you start to live with that awareness, something subtle changes. The world feels less like a machine and more like a companion. A leaf falling at the right moment can move you to tears. A silence between words can feel like a revelation. This is not regression into superstition. It's the rediscovery of enchantment. Jung believed the loss of that enchantment was the great sickness of modern humanity. We've replaced mystery with explanation and wonder with control. Synchronicity returns the soul to its natural climate, awe. Try an experiment. For the next few days, stay alert but relaxed. Don't look for signs. Let them find you. When something stirs that strange sense of recognition, stop and breathe. Notice your thoughts, your body, your surroundings. What emotion is present? What question have you been carrying? You might find that the answer has been walking beside you all along. Jung said that what we need most is a symbolic life, a life where outer and inner exchange meaning constantly. Synchronicity is how we remember that this is possible, and perhaps that's the quiet miracle behind all these meaningful coincidences. They remind us that the world is not indifferent. It mirrors us, challenges us, even loves us in its own language. When you start to listen, life becomes a dialogue instead of a monologue. You are not alone inside your head. The universe is thinking with you. And in that recognition, you touch the heart of Mind Alchemy. Transformation not by force, but by awareness. Synchronicity does not happen in a vacuum. It thrives where awareness grows, like light feeding the roots of a hidden plant. The more you attend to your inner life, the more these patterns appear. It is not superstition, it is sensitivity. Jung said that when the unconscious wants to be known, it does not speak in words. It speaks through events, through dreams, through symbols that repeat until you finally listen. To live a symbolic life means walking through the world as if it were whispering back and realizing it always was. Think of the times your life pivoted. Not the grand, planned decisions, but the quiet ones. The coffee shop you almost didn't enter, where you met someone who changed everything. The wrong turn that led you to the right path. The conversation overheard that shifted your entire view of what's possible. The rational mind calls these coincidences. The intuitive mind recognizes them as alignments. Each moment of synchronicity carries a question. Are you willing to trust the invisible pattern that's forming around you? When Jung spoke of the self, the totality of the psyche, he meant something larger than the personality. The ego wants control, the self wants coherence. The ego collects experiences, the self weaves them into meaning. Synchronicity is the self's way of showing the ego where it stands in the greater pattern. It's a nudge toward integration. When you notice it, you momentarily step out of time. The boundary between inner and outer softens, and for a breath, you remember that both belong to the same source. There is a discipline in this sensitivity. Jung did not suggest that we chase every coincidence like a prophecy. That only feeds obsession. The goal is balance, living with eyes open to meaning, but feet still on the ground. Keep a journal of synchronicities, not to prove anything, but to track your conversation with the universe. Over months, you might see themes repeating: water, mirrors, bridges, thresholds. Each symbol has a story that connects to your current transformation. As you record them, you begin to witness how the psyche reveals its seasons, its winters of stillness, its springs of renewal. Synchronicity teaches patience. It doesn't obey schedules or logic. It appears when you are ready, not when you demand it. Sometimes it goes silent, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're being asked to live the lesson you already received. The pauses are as sacred as the signs. In those quiet stretches, you learn faith, the ability to walk without confirmation. Faith, in Jung's sense, is not belief in dogma. It is trust in the unfolding of the psyche. It's easy to dismiss this as poetic thinking until it happens to you. Imagine you've been struggling with a decision, whether to leave a relationship, move to a new city, change careers. You sit in confusion for weeks, afraid of the unknown. Then one day, a random podcast plays a sentence that feels like it was written for you. Later, a billboard carries the same phrase. That night, you dream of crossing a river. When you wake, the fear has loosened its grip. That is not accident, it's alignment. Your unconscious has synchronized the outer world to mirror your inner readiness. You still must choose, but now you see the road. Synchronicity asks for courage, because when you realize the world mirrors you, excuses disappear. You can no longer pretend life happens to you. You see that your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs shape the texture of events, not in a simplistic manifestation way, but in the deep recognition that participation creates pattern. Each choice sends out a vibration, the world answers accordingly. Responsibility replaces victimhood. Wonder replaces boredom. You start living as if your smallest actions mattered, and they do. This awareness also humbles you. The ego loves to claim ownership of miracles, to believe it summoned meaning by power of will. But true synchronicity reveals how small we are and how vast the pattern is. You are a thread, not the weaver. Your task is to stay supple enough for the thread to flow where it must. Jung saw humility as the doorway to wisdom. When you drop the need to control, you become transparent to meaning, and meaning can finally move through you. In therapy, Jung watched patients transform not by analyzing their pain endlessly, but by experiencing symbols that reconnected them with life. A dream image, a coincidence, a chance encounter. These broke the sterile loop of thought and opened the door to feeling. Healing began not from reasoning, but from resonance. That is the alchemy, turning experience into insight, pain into purpose. The lead of confusion becomes the gold of understanding, and the crucible is everyday life. Modern people still hunger for this, even if we don't name it. We binge media about destiny, soulmates, magical realism, all echoes of synchronicity. Beneath the noise of screens, we crave to feel guided, connected, alive in a meaningful story. Jung would tell us the story is already happening. We just forgot we were characters in it. Every time you pause and notice a meaningful coincidence, you re-enter the plot. You become conscious within the dream. To live that way is not to float in mysticism. It's to wake up. It's to remember that logic and mystery are not enemies, but partners. That science describes the mechanism and symbolism reveals the message. You don't have to choose between reason and wonder. You can stand in both. The world is larger than either one alone. So the next time life arranges a strange echo, a phrase repeated, a symbol resurfacing, a moment of impossible timing, don't brush it away. Sit with it. Let it speak. Ask yourself what inside you is being mirrored. Maybe it's fear asking for release, or hope asking for trust. Maybe it's simply the universe reminding you that it's still dancing with you. Synchronicity doesn't prove anything. It invites everything. It's not about control. It's about connection. And if you listen closely enough, you'll realize that the same intelligence moving the stars also moves within you, arranging each coincidence as an act of quiet grace. There comes a point in everyone's life when coincidences no longer feel accidental. Something inside you begins to suspect design. The pattern may unfold slowly at first, a phrase repeating, a song reappearing, a stranger's face in unexpected places, until you can't ignore that reality seems to be reflecting your inner weather. Jung believed that this is the psyche's way of bridging its two halves, the conscious and the unconscious. When the bridge forms, we experience synchronicity. It's the moment when the story you're living outside suddenly rhymes with the story you're living inside. The rational mind calls this imagination, but the soul calls it participation. The psyche does not speak English. It speaks in images, symbols, and timing. Each event carries an emotional tone that matters more than the event itself. A bird flying through a window might sound trivial, but if it happens as you're grieving, it can feel like the world acknowledging your pain. Meaning doesn't have to be universal to be real. It only has to be alive for you. Jung once said that meaning makes a thing real. Without it, life becomes flat, random, mechanical. We wake up, work, consume, repeat, an endless cycle that leaves the heart untouched. Synchronicity interrupts that flatness. It reminds you that life has texture, that something intelligent moves beneath its surface. It's as if the universe breathes with you. When you despair, it sends small signs of compassion. When you doubt, it sends mirrors of confirmation. You begin to see that awareness itself draws these reflections closer, like stars brightening when you look up. Still, synchronicity is not a trick to get what you want. It's an invitation to become who you are. Jung saw it as a signal that individuation, the process of becoming whole, is underway. The ego resists, but the self orchestrates. As you integrate shadow and light, your outer life rearranges itself. People exit, opportunities shift, symbols emerge. The outer pattern expresses the inner evolution. It can be unsettling because the ego craves stability, but transformation is movement. Meaningful coincidences appear to assure you that you're not lost, you're molting. This is why many people report an avalanche of synchronicities during crises. When everything familiar collapses, the unconscious floods the surface. In those moments, even small details shimmer with significance. You sense that something larger than logic is guiding the collapse, stripping away what no longer fits. Jung described it as the self calling the ego home. The coincidences are like breadcrumbs through the forest. They don't rescue you. They remind you the path is alive. To work with synchronicity, you must be willing to live symbolically. That doesn't mean drifting into fantasy. It means reading reality like sacred text. Every day offers verses, some gentle, some fierce. A broken object, a recurring word, a sudden delay, each can carry metaphor. The task is to feel their resonance without demanding their meaning. The universe doesn't speak in direct instructions, it speaks in atmosphere. Pay attention to what deepens your presence. If a coincidence makes you stop and breathe, it has already served its purpose. The Western mind tends to separate inner from outer, sacred from secular. Jung shattered that boundary. He said psyche and matter are two sides of the same coin. Synchronicity is where the coin flips in your hand, showing both faces at once. When you begin to live that truth, humility follows. You stop seeing the world as a stage for your personal drama and start seeing yourself as part of a living intelligence. Gratitude replaces control. Every breath feels like participation in something vast. Science will one day find language for what Jung intuited. Quantum physics already whispers about entanglement, about particles linked across distance. Maybe consciousness is the same, woven through time, responding to attention. Jung would smile at the thought, not because it proves him right, but because it shows the world still unfolding its mystery. He never wanted disciples, he wanted observers of their own souls. Synchronicity is the perfect teacher for that. It demands observation, not belief. If you wish to practice this awareness, begin simply. Each morning, set an intention not for results, but for receptivity. Let me see what I'm meant to see today. Move through the hours with soft eyes. When a coincidence touches you, note what you were thinking or feeling just before it happened. Later, reflect on the emotional thread connecting them. Over time, you'll realize that life organizes itself around your attention. What you honor with awareness grows more vivid. What you ignore fades. That is not mysticism, it's participation. And if you fear delusion, remember balance. Jung himself warned that inflation, mistaking the message for a mission, is the shadow of revelation. When the ego claims ownership of mystery, madness follows. Let synchronicity humble you, not inflate you. The true alchemist doesn't say, I control the fire. They say, I tend it. You are tending the fire of meaning. Stay close enough to feel its warmth, not so close that it consumes you. In the end, synchronicity is less about predicting the future than about perceiving the present fully. It draws you into the now, where the threads of time cross. Past wounds echo as symbols, future possibilities shimmer as hints, and you stand at the center, the point of awareness where everything meets. From there, life is no longer something happening to you. It's something happening through you. The conversation between psyche and world becomes continuous. Every breath is dialogue, every moment a sign. When you start to live this way, ordinary days become luminous. A stranger's smile feels like a benediction. A delay in traffic feels like protection. The mundane and the miraculous trade places. And you realize that maybe they were never different. Only your sight was. This is the quiet revolution of synchronicity. Not changing the world, but changing the way you see it. And once seen, you cannot unsee. The whole cosmos begins to feel like home. There is a silence that follows the moment of realization, a stillness that comes when you finally understand that life has been speaking to you all along. Once you glimpse the thread of synchronicity, the temptation is to chase it, to decode every symbol, to treat each event as a secret message waiting for interpretation. But the deeper lesson, Jung would say, is not to accumulate meanings. It is to live meaningfully. The point is not to collect signs, but to inhabit awareness. Synchronicity is not a game of prediction. It is a training in presence. To live with presence means to notice without grasping, to witness without clinging. Jung believed that the psyche reveals itself through rhythm, not through explanation. Every meaningful coincidence arrives like the echo of a heartbeat, reminding you that the self is alive and responsive. But when you turn the process into obsession, the signal collapses into noise. The ego wants certainty. The self wants dialogue. The difference is humility. Synchronicity asks you to trust the current without trying to steer it. Imagine standing on a shoreline watching the tide. You cannot command the waves, but you can learn their pattern, sense when they rise, when they retreat. Synchronicity moves the same way. There are seasons when it flows strongly, when change is near, when the unconscious stirs, and seasons when it withdraws into quiet. Many people panic when the signs disappear, fearing they've lost their connection. But silence is part of the cycle. The psyche needs space to integrate what has been revealed. The absence of signs is itself a sign. It says, live now, don't analyze. Growth requires digestion. You begin to notice that the coincidences which touch you most deeply carry emotional weight. They arrive charged with feeling, goosebumps, tears, a sudden sense of clarity. Jung called this numinosity, the energy of the sacred. It is what makes a moment unforgettable, what burns it into memory. The sacred does not announce itself with thunder. It enters through resonance. You feel it more than you can explain it. In that feeling lies the transformation. Meaning is not an intellectual formula. It is a vibration that alters you. Synchronicity often appears when you are about to make a leap. The ego hesitates, afraid to move, and then something external mirrors the internal tension. A door opens, a phrase repeats, a dream insists. These alignments are not there to make the decision for you. They are mirrors of readiness. The universe cannot choose on your behalf, but it can show you that you are not choosing alone. When you act from that awareness, courage flows more easily. You realize that uncertainty is not a threat. It's the gateway where freedom begins. The practice, then, is not to control the signs, but to cultivate alignment. The more honest you are with yourself, the more coherent the outer world becomes. Denial fractures the dialogue. Authenticity restores it. Jung saw this in therapy constantly. When a patient stopped pretending, when they admitted fear, desire, grief, life outside the clinic began to change. New people appeared, opportunities unfolded, old patterns broke. The outer world mirrored the honesty of the inner one. That is synchronicity in its purest form, life adjusting to truth. Living this way demands responsibility. You can't blame fate for everything, nor can you hide behind signs to avoid action. Meaningful coincidences are invitations, not instructions. The decision remains yours, but you make that decision differently once you recognize that the world participates in your becoming. You start to sense cooperation where you once saw chaos. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is life showing me right now? That single shift transforms victimhood into authorship. Sometimes synchronicity will bring pain. The pattern that guides you toward wholeness may have to dismantle what you thought was safety. A relationship ends, a dream collapses, an illusion dies. At first it feels like betrayal. Only later do you see that the break was necessary for the next pattern to emerge. Jung warned that the self cares more about completeness than comfort. The psyche will sacrifice stability if it means growth. When this happens, the world may respond with a series of harsh synchronicities, doors closing in unison, events forcing surrender. Trust them. The alchemist knows that fire is not the enemy of metal. It is the process of purification. The alchemy of mind happens quietly. You begin with confusion, the lead of not understanding, and through reflection and awareness, it turns to gold. Each coincidence refines the metal a little more. Eventually, you notice that you no longer ask for signs the way you used to. You don't need them to reassure you. You feel them as a natural pulse beneath experience. You realize that every breath, every meeting, every challenge is already synchronized. Synchronicity becomes less an event and more a state of consciousness. That state is gratitude. Gratitude for the mystery itself, for the way life organizes around sincerity, for the beauty of unseen design. Gratitude dissolves the need for control. You stop demanding that the universe prove itself. You simply meet it halfway, trusting that whatever arises carries meaning, even if you don't yet see it. In that trust, your perception widens. You start noticing small wonders again. The pattern of light on the floor, the timing of a breeze, the unexpected kindness of a stranger. Ordinary things regain their depth. That is the true reward of synchronicity. Not prediction, but participation in wonder. And maybe this is the secret Jung wanted us to find, that we are never truly separate from the intelligence that arranges our lives. We are cells of a larger mind, sparks of the same fire. The psyche and the cosmos are one conversation, spoken in the dialect of coincidence and emotion. When you begin to listen, you realize the dialogue never stopped. It only waited for you to be quiet enough to hear it. The world is not asking for belief, it's offering relationship. The question is whether you're willing to answer. At some point, the practice of noticing turns into a way of being. What began as curiosity becomes communion. You no longer chase signs, yet they find you with effortless grace. The more grounded you are, the clearer the patterns become. You start living as though the entire universe is a living mirror, and in a way it is. Jung said that the psyche and matter are two aspects of one reality. The more consciously you participate in that unity, the more life speaks fluently through coincidence. Every encounter, every setback, every small joy begins to shimmer with symbolic weight. Nothing is wasted because everything participates in meaning. You walk through the day differently now. The morning sunlight feels like an affirmation, the passing faces on the street like archetypes walking briefly through your film. You are not detached from the world anymore. You are woven into it. This is what Jung called individuation, not isolation, but integration. The ego stops trying to dominate life and starts dancing with it. You see that surrender was never defeat. It's like a defeat. It was collaboration. Control was the illusion. Participation is the truth. When you live from that truth, synchronicity becomes constant, not because the world changed, but because you finally joined its rhythm. In that rhythm, you discover that meaning is self-generating. It doesn't wait for logic or approval. It blooms wherever awareness lands. You might be doing something simple, washing dishes, walking your dog, and suddenly a thought arrives that ties together months of experience. That is synchronicity too, the alignment of inner realization with outer simplicity. The more honest you become, the thinner the veil grows. Even silence feels communicative. You sense that every pause, every delay, every misstep has its own sacred geometry. It no longer matters whether anyone else sees it. The recognition itself is enough. You have become fluent in the language of life. This awareness doesn't make you special, it makes you humble. The ego wants to feel chosen, but the truth is more generous. Everyone is chosen the moment they begin to listen. Synchronicity is democracy at the level of spirit. It is available to every soul willing to notice. The mystic and the scientist, the artist and the skeptic, all are being whispered to by the same intelligence. Some call it God, some call it psyche, some call it pattern. Jung didn't insist on a name. He only said that the experience is undeniable when it happens, and that denying it makes life smaller than it needs to be. There will still be days of noise when nothing seems to align, when the world feels mute again. Do not despair. The conversation hasn't ended. It has gone underground. The psyche has seasons like nature. Winter doesn't mean death. It means gestation. During these quiet periods, you are integrating what you've learned. The absence of synchronicity gives you room to act without reassurance, to trust your own inner compass. That trust is the proof that the lesson has taken root. When the next wave of coincidences rises, you will meet it not with astonishment, but with gratitude. You'll recognize it as an old friend returning. One of Jung's most radical ideas was that meaning itself is a healing force. When you find meaning in an experience, even pain transforms. Suffering loses its venom when it belongs to a story. Synchronicity helps you find that story. It reminds you that your hardships too are part of the design, that the dark nights of the soul are not detours but initiations. They break the shell of the ego so that consciousness can expand. You begin to understand why the scarab appeared for Jung's patient. Rebirth requires breaking. Every coincidence that shakes you is an invitation to be born again, more awake, more whole. If you follow that path long enough, the separation between inner and outer collapses entirely. You no longer say it happened to me. You say it happened through me. Every creative act, every encounter becomes co-authorship with the unseen. Even your thoughts feel less like possessions and more like arrivals. You realize that the mind is not a container, but a conduit. Synchronicity flows through that conduit, translating the invisible into experience. When you align with it, life feels enchanted without needing miracles. The mundane becomes mystical, simply because you are paying attention. This awareness carries a quiet responsibility. To see meaning everywhere is to treat life with reverence. You speak more carefully, listen more deeply, act with more integrity, because you know the world responds to the quality of your consciousness. The smallest gesture, a smile, a kind word, a moment of patience, ripples outward, altering the pattern. You are no longer a spectator. You are a participant in the great experiment of awareness. Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Synchronicity is the proof that becoming is mutual. The universe becomes itself through your recognition. And then one day, you notice something subtle. The need to look for signs has vanished. Every breath feels like one. The alignment that once startled you now feels natural, like gravity or heartbeat. You understand that synchronicity was never an external phenomenon. It was a mirror revealing your own coherence. When you live aligned with truth, the world aligns with you. When you forget, it gently nudges you back through patterns, through timing, through grace disguised as accident. The dance continues. The dialogue never ends. You walk outside at dusk and the sky is turning gold. The air is still, the city hums, a bird crosses your path. Nothing extraordinary happens, and yet everything does. You smile, not because you've decoded a message, but because you no longer need to. Life itself is the message. It always was.